everybody. Do I have to go at the top of the table? Do I? Oh! Hey there.
Hello.
It's lovely to see you all. Do you have some questions for me?
When you started writing, did you have an idol? Or
an idol?
someone who
Not really. It's not a word I would use actually, idol, but kind of like a role model, somebody you felt. I suppose the books that I used to read myself as a child would have been the ones that I would, when I started to write, when I started to write books for publication, I've been writing all my life since I was sort of 6 or something, but when I started to write books that are actually being published, I suppose I would have thought back to the books that I really enjoyed when I was a kid. And they would have been books that were written way back in the early 20th century. Books like A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Do you know that one? Yeah. And that was my really favourite one of all, I think. And also I loved, do you know E. Nesbit? She also wrote around about that time. Yeah. And the one that I liked best of hers was, not The Would Be Goods, that's the sequel. The first one was Story of the Treasure Seekers. I loved that. So those would have been, I suppose those kind of writers would have been the people that I would have looked to. And of course, when I was your kind of age, the really big writer for children was Enid Blyton. She was absolutely huge when I was a child. And she was the kind of writer, she wrote hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books. So you always had a book by her. And then there comes a certain age when suddenly you don't like her anymore. And you're kind of lost then for a while because suddenly you've just got too old for a certain thing, and it's a horrible feeling. You think, oh no, and there's nobody else that's going to fill this gap. And then of course you do find another author and you can move on. So she would have been, I suppose, the equivalent of what's her name? What's her name? Thank you, J.K. Rowling. In my day, she would have been the really big writer.
What was it like to be given a medal from the President of Ireland?
Well, that was a pretty nice feeling, actually. I would recommend it. Yeah, it's, it doesn't happen every day. It doesn't even happen every lifetime. But it was a really nice thing, and she spoke so well. I was really very moved by what she said about the importance of books and the importance of being able to read.
When you were in school, did you get like good marks in English?
I was that horrible little girl who sits in the front row because she can't see the blackboard because she has to wear glasses like you. And I used to sit in the front row, and I didn't know for a long time, until I was about 8, that I needed glasses. So I had to sit in the front row because I couldn't see the blackboard. And I sat there and I just drank in everything the teacher said, and I was really good at English, and I wrote these essays, and then what did the teacher do? She read them out on a Monday morning, the essays I wrote, and everybody hated me because my essays were being read out, and I was going, so I really wasn't the kind of person that you'd like to know. But yeah, and I met a little boy once, and he couldn't understand why anybody wanted to be a writer. He just didn't understand the idea. He just thought it was a mad thing to want to be, and he looked at me and he said, but that's like doing homework all the time. And I said, you know something, that's a really good remark. It was a very good comment. But actually, I was the kind of kid who did actually like doing homework. So I was that horrible child who wrote the good essays and got them read out, and I did get good marks in English. Yeah.
What was your first book, and did you find it hard to get it published?
No, it's a bit kind of complicated. I wrote a book first of all for my son, and I didn't get it published in the beginning, and then I got it. But the publishers liked it, and then they asked me to write something different. So the first books that I had published were, they had really boring titles now I come to think of it. They were called The Country Adventure and The Dublin Adventure, and they were kind of companion books. And one was about a Dublin child going to the country for the first time and kind of misunderstanding life in the country. And the other one was about the country children coming to Dublin for the first time and kind of misunderstanding life in Dublin. And they were kind of funny stories. And then I'll tell you what happened then. So they then kind of went out of print, after a certain length of time, they're all bought up and there's no more books available. So then the publishers came to me with a really good idea, and they said, those books that you wrote years ago about Dublin and the country, and they said, why don't you have it, now that you're much more experienced as a writer, why don't you go back and have another bash at those books and maybe rewrite them? So I did. I went back and I rewrote the books, and I gave them new titles, and now they have, I think, the best titles, or some of the best titles. And now they're called, the Country Adventure is called Cows Are Vegetarians. I think that's a good title. I really like that title, Cows Are Vegetarians. And then the other one is called Animals Don't Have Ghosts. But the question about, is it difficult to get published? Yeah, it is quite difficult to get published, and you have to be good, but you also have to be lucky. And you have to find the right publisher who likes your work and who's looking for the kind of books that you're writing at the right time. So there's an awful lot of luck involved. So lots of people can write really good books and just never quite find a publisher that matches well with what they're doing at the right time. So it's partly about being good, but it's also about being lucky. And I have been very lucky. And you've got a question there.
What did you want to do when you were younger?
I wanted to be a writer. I'll tell you what, I read Little Women. Did you all read Little Women?
Yeah.
Well, I read Little Women when I was around about your age, maybe not 10 or something. And in Little Women there's a character called Jo, and she wants to be a writer when she grows up.
Yeah.
And I suddenly thought, wow, this is a girl after my own heart. And from that moment on, I decided, this is what I'm going to be. And I actually discovered the word author. I can't remember now whether Jo actually uses the word author, but I heard the word author being used. I thought author is much grander than writer. I think what I want to be is an author. And then people would ask me when I was about 9 or 10, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would say, I want to be an author. And they went, ha ha ha, and they kind of patted me on the head and said, what a charming idea. And what they really meant was, it'll never happen. I think actually maybe that's why I went and did it, just to get back at those people who were so nasty. The way grown-ups can sometimes be a little bit, they talk down to kids a little bit, and I remember that feeling really well. Yeah, I really remember that feeling of being talked down. Even nice adults can do it. They don't mean it, but they do it. Yeah.
Did you write The Moon King?
I wrote The Moon King.
Yeah.
A long time ago. Yeah. Yeah. Did you read that one?
In 4th or 3rd class.
Yeah, that's about the level it is, yeah. Actually, when I wrote, do you know the way that in that story, part of the story is from inside the little boy's head, and then part of it's just ordinary narrative, just somebody telling the story. When I first wrote the first chapter of that, my first go at writing that book, I wrote the whole first chapter from inside the little boy's head. And I gave it to my son to read, and he was 10 at the time. He was just the right age for it. And he came back to me and he sort of looked at me and he said, And his friend read it as well. They both went, they looked at each other and went, And they didn't want to say anything rude or nasty, but I could see they had a bit of a problem. And I said, what's the problem? And they said, you know something, we think maybe other children wouldn't understand this book. So of course they thought that they were really smart and really clever and they could understand it, but they thought that maybe writing in that style was a bit tough. So I took their advice, and that's why I changed it, and then I just had smaller bits coming from inside his own head, and then the rest of the story is told in a more conventional style. So I think that works. Yeah. I hope so, yeah.
You get a lot of money being an author.
I wish I got a lot of money. I wish I did. I get some money, but it's really not a lot. It's not as much as, say, a teacher, for example.
Because apparently J.K. Rowling, she's the second richest woman.
But you see, there's only one J.K. Rowling, and there's only, in every profession you get somebody who's at the very, very peak of it and they are mega rich. And then everybody thinks that all the others are the same and they're not. They really are not. I know it's very unjust, but there you go. But I don't do it for the money. I do it because I love it. I really enjoy it. I would like to get a little bit more money, of course. Who wouldn't like to get a little bit more money? But that's not the point. The point is that I really enjoy doing it. And I can't imagine really doing anything different. Very often children ask me, well, if you didn't write, what would you like to do? What would you do? If you didn't write, what would you do? And I say, die, I think. Die. That would be the alternative. Yeah.
That sounds nice.
Well, it doesn't sound really nice, but I just couldn't imagine anything else. This is how I think about, this is how I am. This is the person I am, the person who writes. So I can't imagine not being me, really. So if I wasn't me, then wouldn't be here, would I?